Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We are happy and privileged to have you, Professor Kamal, here with us speaking. So probably this challenging time of COVID-19 brought people together in a different way. So finally, we can lock some time with you and speak, and it's always great to be connected to you. So let me start by introducing you in a few lines. So Professor Kamal is an MIT professor of mechanical engineering, and he is leading the lab of director of the Center of Complex Engineering Systems. He is as well the director of the Ibn Khaldun Fellowship Program, which you will learn about now. It's an amazing combined program between Saudi and the States. MIT. So, of course, Professor Kamal has published so many publications in technical aspect as well as innovation. And I love the way you combine the culture and innovation human part with the deep technical kind of robotics and artificial intelligence and computer and quantum science. So we admire this about you. And I guess we could start right now. So to speak about the Ibn Khaldun Fellowship Program, as I was privileged to be a fellow in the year 2017-18. So just to let you know briefly what it is. So it's a combined program between Saudi Arabia and MIT, where every year they choose about 5 to 7 Saudi female PhD holders, and it's a competition, like a nationwide competition, and they choose those very selected women to go and conduct a one-year fellowship at MIT. So you get the chance to choose which professor you would like to work with and which lab, and it's a very enriched, very exciting, life-changing experience, actually. And that's where we have met Professor Kamal. And in the light of that, so many things in my life have changed. The way I think, the way I see things, the way I lead, the way I reflect innovation in Saudi and beyond. So why don't we briefly give a little bit of background, Professor Kamal, on this amazing program to the audience?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sufana, for the opportunity to be, in this special seminar series, and also to thank the participants with us today. So actually, the collaboration started. I was invited at KFUPM about 2006, and I spent about 10 days and spoke, with the faculty, with the department heads, the deans. And one of the important meetings, of course, was with His Excellency, Dr. Khalid Sultan, who was the rector at KFUPM at that time. And, as soon as we started the meeting, he went straight to the, speaking about or asking me about international collaborations. And at that time, I was involved in the MIT Singapore program. So I said a few things about that, just the headlines. The education aspect, the research, the link with the industry, and then within like a minute, he, very quickly, identified, the objectives, and he wanted to have a collaboration. So, and it took us maybe like a year and a half after that, to put the program together in clean water and clean energy. And as you know, KFUPM at that time was all men. So MIT had requested, that, for the collaboration or the partnership to be complete, to add an activity, for the Saudi women. And that's how the Ibn Khaldun program came about. So we can say that it started with His Excellency, Dr. Khalid Sultan, and his vision, in the setting up the partnership between MIT and KFUPM at that time. And then later on in one of the board meetings, and His Excellency Khalid Faleh, was chairing the meeting. And when we were reporting, and he saw that we had only two fellows, in the in the program, and he asked why, and we said, basically this is what the budget that we have, and to allocate, for this program. So thanks to him, that he moved it, I think it was around 2013 to Aramco, and gave the program a huge, boost, and and increased, the capacity to about 10 per year. And then after 5 years, him and Dr. Anas Al-Faris, and also His Excellency Dr. Turki, who was Saud, who was the ex-president of CAXT, decided to move it, to CAXT. And I think CAXT is maybe the home for it, since CAXT also deals with capacity building. And so I'm thankful to all of them, including Dr. Turki Saud, His Excellency, and also to Dr. Anas Al-Faris for all their support for the program, because MIT really believes in this program, and we have all the support from the upper administration to continue, working with our fellows in the kingdom, and of course, not only when they are at MIT, but also when they come back. Sorry for the long description, but
Professor, it's always great to hear how supportive you were and thoughtful, and you had this vision with the right supporters and champions from Saudi. So we are very privileged to this kind of leadership, and I can see that it was very creative, very innovative right from the beginning, which probably brings us to the question that we always debate about and we always think about is, how can you define innovation, and how can you distinguish that from creativity? So is it the same? Is it different? Can you let us know from your opinion?
Yeah, so I think, many people have spoken about, these two key words. And so creativity, in the end, is the process of, generating and producing novel ideas, and ideas that can be useful in any domain, not just in the technical one. It can be in any domain. So that is like the part where people, think, imagine, and come up with these with the ideas. So all these ideas, of course, in the end, not all of them, but I think the good ones, end up being patented. Like at MIT, we do maybe about 2 patent declarations per day, and at least, and then also at least 1 patent is granted every other day. So this is, I think, important aspect. When we look at, the companies, also they do a lot of, idea generation, and they protect those ideas in different ways. And one of them, with patents, for example, maybe a couple of years ago or so, IBM generated about over 9,000 patents, Samsung almost 6,000 in that 1 year. And so it's important, to do this. In the end, I believe that, not emphasizing maybe like the number of patents, but the patents that are in use in serving the people, and of course, bringing revenue, to the owners of these patents. Because one can have like many patents, but if they are not being used, then yeah.
It's the impact, and it's like the social and the economical impact of an innovative project, which takes it from an invention probably to innovation.
Exactly.
I guess.
Yeah. So that, yeah, and then the innovation, is like the implementation of these creative ideas. How to capture.
Yeah, it requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of commitment. So I think at different levels, different layers. So can you tell us about what do you think, I believe that each and every part, starting from an individual right into big enterprises, organizations require different disciplines on different levels to conduct
Exactly.
innovation.
So, so just to summarize that the innovation, like we see it as, as the process, right, of, you know, capturing these ideas, maybe filtering them, you know, how to fund and finance, you know, how to develop even further. Sometimes you have to maybe modify and adjust and maybe clarify, and then of course in the end implementing them. So that whole process in bringing, you know, these ideas to what you might call the commercialization or the translation process of these ideas of inventions, so that you can have like a good, you know, for service or for product or some other aspect. Yeah. So these are maybe the differences. Yeah.
That's right, and I guess it needs to serve a need as well. So it
Mhm.
requires a lot of also capturing what is the need that in the surrounding environment. So the innovation that has happened in the past served something or a job that need to be done in the past in that time, not necessarily applicable to our current time. So do you have any examples of innovation that has highlighted from the past versus ones from the modern life? How are they different? How are they similar?
Yeah. So so the one example that I usually like to speak about is that of you know, Josephine Cochrane. You know, she, of course, she was a woman, and sometimes she was bothered, you know, by the, you know, her dishes and cups and glasses, you know, get chipped, and especially, you know, the expensive ones that are, you know, in porcelain. And so she decided to invent the, you know, the dishwasher, right? And then so her idea, in fact, was great. You know, it's she did not think like of a robot having like two arms like we do, and then washing, you know, the dishes and glasses and so on and utensils. But she thought of something completely different. You know, like some kind of a box, and then using water jet inside so that it can, you know, washes the dishes. And then the important thing there is that she did not have any background, you know, in the mechanical design or mechanical implementation. So she partnered with a mechanic, you know, so that he can help her build, you know, this prototype. So, and then in the end, so in her case, she went, you know, from the idea, how to partner, you know, make the prototype. She established, you know, her company, the Cochrane Crescent Washing Machine Company. And at that time, you know, she sold to businesses, you know, not to individual consumers. And then I think about maybe a few years later, you know, she won an award for the design and durability of this washing machine. So this was in around 1885. Okay, a long time ago. And then, you know, this dishwashers, you know, came, you know, to use, like especially like in the US and Europe and so on, you know, at the consumers, maybe 70 years later, right? You know, so she was ahead of her time. And the reason I like this example is that she captured, you know, from the creativity, and then she did all the process, you know, of the innovation in commercialization, and then even added, you know, to it, and adding the partnership and so on. So I think it's one of the good examples that I like to speak about.
So it's definitely a great example, but makes me think a lot about innovation theories and how it was. So this product is very amazing. Whoever tries it finds the value of it. But I'm just thinking in some setups and some cultures, there's still lots of resistance to those things that will strip kind of any traditional kind of work that is associated to certain characters or figures in the society. I'm just thinking a dishwasher has been rejected for a very long time in in like يعني الشرق الأوسط or Middle East or even the more
Sure.
developing countries, because women especially think that it's something that is associated with their characters to wash and to clean and to
Yeah,
manage the kitchen. So I'm just thinking that the theory of culture and how it affects innovation
sure.
is very valid in this example as well.
Yeah, I mean, what you said was even true, even here in the U.S. in Josephine Cochrane's time, the women at that time also thought about the same thing, that they do their own thing. And then until maybe the mid to late 50s and then early 60s, when, maybe some of the responsibilities perhaps and other things with women started changing. And then so this dishwasher, came, to be very, very, very useful. Yeah. But it's important, what you said is like on one hand, one would want to use, the technologies, to make our life easier and maybe more efficient and more productive so that we can use the time, for perhaps something, I was going to say maybe more useful, right? But it's important, I think, to maintain, like a balance between, our traditions, our history, on one hand, and then at the same time, with the modern aspect of things. Yeah.
Definitely. So, would you like to give us an example of like an innovative solution from the modern time, do you think? Or
yeah, so I think from the modern time, I think there are, several things, but I wanted to maybe use an example. You asked earlier about, how to foster, I think, the individual and so on. We can go back to that. But this, I think this example highlights, not only the innovation, creativity and innovation side, but at the same time, the importance of the environment and the leadership and so on around those people who are, creative and in the end also innovative. So there were two scientists, the Dick Shoup and L.V. Smith. So they were developing, this advanced graphic, technology. They called it super paint, at that time. And it was within the leaders of the park, you can call it unit at that time, did not see it in the vision of the personal computing that this entity, was so that as, their core business. And this thing with graphics, was not useful. And then, people say that they even made it maybe a little bit difficult for them to work in that environment because on one hand, these creative people, they were coming up with a great technology, but then the leadership didn't see it, lined up with the core business. So they left and then, hooked up with, other gurus, in computer graphics. And then they generated the Pixar company that was later bought by Steve Jobs and then sold to Disney in 2006 for like around $7 billion or so. So I see this as an example, as I mentioned, of the creative people and then within environment. So they had to go somewhere else, to be able to do what they had to do.
Well, I'm glad they made the decision and they moved somewhere else, because so many ideas and creative ideas and business models just die before they even see the light. And it all depends on the leadership and the time and space, I guess, the leader creates for those creative people to unleash their talent.
But now, sorry to interrupt, Dr. Sufana, but now there are many companies that, you might want to refer to this as like a radical translation. So when they have people within the company that generate, ideas that may not have anything to do with the core business. So they put a team around that group, very quickly. They develop, further the idea. They launch that whole team, with a startup. And then if it wins, the company wins with it. If not, they regroup, bring all those people back if they want to, and then they go on. So what this means is that, that the companies, not all of them, but some of them have, their core business and objectives and so on. But at the same time, keeping track of these, other, opportunities. And
I think it's a fine line between having some agile teams in some buckets of functional units or business units that can tolerate failure, can tolerate getting iteration and feedback from customers while you are maintaining your core business. But I guess it's a fine balance between.
Exactly. And this is this kind of structure and characteristics that you would want to see at these different levels, let's say at the individual level, at the group level, and then at the organization or even the nation level. And then each one of them has like its own kind of features that either that it exists in those people or you develop it, right? It's like, I don't know, like I was going to say like singing, for example. Maybe, some people, are born that way with a gift and they can sing. They don't maybe need,
lots of training,
much practice or training as somebody else, who, wants to sing, and then they need like a training and coaching and so on, and then they can if they have, those elements in it, then they can make it. Yeah,
I definitely believe that innovation is a discipline. It's hard work, it's consistency, and it's a lot of psychological safety and trust within an organization, so people can actually use their creative minds and accept failure. So it takes a lot of human capital work as well. So this our kind of discussion is bringing us to this very important point, I guess. What is the role of the human capital in driving change and accepting failure and driving innovation from your point of view? The way we have learned from you, Professor Kamal, is that you are from the very few people that I've met who really realizes the importance of building individuals before you go and build smart cities or smart robotics or machinery. And
yes, so thank you. Because I always say the roads, the highways, the airports, hospitals, buildings in general, all of these are very, very important. Infrastructure, is important. However, who runs these things, who operates, who generates like the proper organizations, it is the people, and then the success of an organization and the success of a nation depends on the people. And so for example, if we look at the success, let's say, of a nation, and for the nation to be successful, it has to be like competitive, in some aspect. And so the researchers define, that are like three levels, like in a nation. And this like leads us to the human factor. So one is like the what you might call like the basic factors. So these are things that have maybe like institutions, infrastructure, health, primary education. This is like level one, and then you go one level higher. And these are all like the indicators for competitiveness. So the next one is like the higher education, the markets, maybe the labor market efficiency, technological readiness, and so on. But then you get to the third level, and this is like the highest level where a nation can be like leading, and this is the level of innovation and business sophistication, right? And so this level, one can think of it as if one does only level one, it's like having its people flying like coach. And then if they add, to the second level, what they call efficiency enhancers, will be having, his or her people flying like in business class. And then when you get to the third level in the innovation and the business sophistication, it's like having like first class, aspect in that way. And so that highest level, and of course, it plays a role in the other two levels too, that the human play an important role, and it is in fact the one that distinguishes between the poor nations and rich nations, or the prosperous nations and the nations that are failing. So this is like one of the indicators for that.
Yeah, well, that's very wise sentences and words. I'm learning a lot here, Professor Kamal, and I'm thinking also that for in the middle class, for instance, organizations used to say that having a multidisciplinary team is very important. You have to have diversity and inclusion, and for so long this has been the buzzing words, but recently what is more important is that people would feel the sense of belonging to a place. And when you have the sense of belonging, you have lots of alignment. And when you are leading with a purpose, I guess, no matter how difficult or challenging the surrounding was, you still have a road that you're following, and you still have a purpose to follow. So I guess that is the new level where people really need to feel that they have sense of belonging, so they can lead this enterprise and having this competitive advantage, especially in challenging times such as the one we are going through.
Sure. Yeah, what you're saying is important, because you can see it like at different levels. Like at the organization, for example, it defines the environment where people work, and it shapes how the people are working by themselves, and also how they are working with others. And it shapes this whole the dynamics. And so it has a structure, there's the culture, the strategy, the resources, and also how allowing these people, whether they are individuals or groups, to take risks, and they're given the also the autonomy and the recognition to do certain tasks or activities, so that they can all be, in this like innovation process. Same thing, when we go down, to like the group level, it's the same thing. So the leadership, the style, of the leadership also plays like a key role, in determining this innovation, creativity, and also in the organizations. And so if we have these, conditions, the climate, the structure, the characteristics of the task that we are given, and then the style and so on of the leadership, they all play an important role. So, for example, if the tasks are challenging, then that have the minds working, and then generates maybe more ideas and more ways of doing things. And similar things at the individual level, from the personality, their motivation aspect, and also their cognitive capability. So all of these, I believe that, as I said, in some places they can come by themselves, but I think in many places, that you can have like a process that is kind of embedding, these kind of concepts, in the place, in the environment.
It seems great, but it definitely requires a lot of work. Can you like tell us how important you think is harnessing innovation in enterprises or organizations these days? So what we have discussed just right now doesn't come by default. It requires a lot of human capital work, a lot of culture, a lot of discipline, a lot of strategy and leadership. And there are still so many organizations that are doing business as usual. So can you let us know how critical and how important it is to have innovation and creativity nowadays? And
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember, Jack Welch, who was the chairman and CEO of General Electric, once said, he was talking about companies, right? And he says, if you do not innovate, death is coming your way very soon. So basically he's emphasizing that for a company, to do well and to continue to do well, he says that like the innovation is not like one time and then we rest. He says it's like a continuous process of innovating, and at the same time, looking what is going on, look around, look at the where the markets, where the businesses, where the technology, where things are going, so that we can have better moves in that way. So there are people who had the gut feeling or the intuition or the vision to see something. Okay. And however, maybe some other people or entities or companies can use technology, can use other tools, to help them evaluate the strategies, evaluate the opportunities, and so on. Yeah.
yes, definitely. Well, yeah, I guess it's not an option anymore to be innovative and creative, especially like we can see now the adoption of technology. All of a sudden, the digital strategy transformation that has been pushed away for so many times or weeks or years, suddenly all the organizations needed to adapt that very quickly, such as in healthcare, as you can see and you
Yes.
know what's happening with COVID-19. That all of a sudden we are adapting technology as a must. So yeah, they say disrupt or get disrupted, I guess. And I can see a few questions here, and I think it's a very important thing to address, Professor Kamal, especially coming from an MIT perspective, is that how important it is to marry the research with creativity and innovation. Can you talk to us more about how important it is to have this kind of alignment between the relevant foundation of research and then transforming those outputs or outcomes into innovative products, services?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, I think what we see, that the whole, I would say, like the purpose of the university or the research, I think, whether it is at the university or at a research unit within a company. So to get to this innovation, there has to be like ideas, right? Remember, we said the innovation is a process, but the process has to act on some ideas that are generated by some people. So I think that maybe two things. One is that the environment, I think, whether it's at the university or a company, to allow for like this, research, for example, from the science point of view, maybe like new materials and new ways of doing things. And then at the same time, there is the other research that advances, that is maybe driven by some, current needs or future needs in that way. And I think those two, I believe that they go together. And then in that case, you can see, I think, the the university, for example, can be playing like a more important role, let's say in some country, not just a place where people go, they listen, they take notes, and then in the end they get a degree, like a piece of paper, and then they start looking for a job. Or it is maybe something different, where this university creates leaders, with ideas and great capability, and that university is playing now an important role in the economy of a country and making the impact, not just for that specific country, but for the world.
Yeah, I guess it also goes back to the leadership. So if you really want to harness research and creativity, I guess you have to decentralize this kind of leadership and get rid of this lots of layers of hierarchy, even in research, because this automatically suppress people's creativity. But sometimes also the environment or the current threat that is happening deviate people from the way they think and automatically, shut down all creative thinking. And this is something that probably many of us is feeling as we are going through this challenging time, is that we are in the survival mode, it's not in the creativity mood. So how do you think we can manage such thing in the light of a threat such as coronavirus?
Well, yeah, so definitely, as we said, that the innovation is like the, this highest level that a nation, can aspire to. And that one itself requires, the talent, requires the creativity and ideas, the skills, entrepreneurship, everything that goes into that, into that process, before generating the ideas and then after generating the ideas. And then along with that, this environment that creates, the incentives, the opportunities, and not for just a few people, if we are talking about like a country level, not just for a few selected people in that country, or let's say we talk about an organization only for a few people in that organization. So it should be like for everybody, so that people can start, running their engines, their minds, and generating ideas, and learning how to not only generate the ideas but go through these processes. And then in the end, it will be like harnessing like all of this talent that is available in a society or in an organization.
Yeah, and there are lots of tools now that can help people like submit their ideas or come together and think about. So there are idea management platforms, and I can see that many organizations is moving towards that and addressing the importance of this. I guess this is a great discussion, Professor Kamal. I can see many questions are being typed down. So would you like us to take some of them? I think they would require some time.
Yeah, please.
For address.
I can answer.
Yes, please. So I can see that there's a question. There are several questions asking how can MIT support more innovation in Saudi. So one of them says MIT have a plan to deal with all Saudi university, example, open an office in that university for help students about innovation. There are several questions that asks about how can MIT support innovation, not only through Ibn Khaldun fellowship, but in universities of Saudi Arabia.
So so first of all, I really believe that MIT, does its partnerships, for impact. Whether it's Saudi Arabia or it's Japan or Singapore or Portugal, or any country or any company in the U.S. or outside the U.S. or any entity, I believe in within the U.S. or outside. I think one of the objectives is about impact, and impact in the end. It's not just like about the papers and the patents and all that, but the impact, the societal impact, like in the end, if let's say did a partnership, and then we're all done, after 5 years or 10 years or whatever the length of this partnership, what is and we look back, what is that impact? So this is, I think, one of the things. And if it happens to be, let's say that there are, for example, could be like from the education side, could be from the research, or maybe involving companies, could be at the university, could be with, government organizations. So I think it could be like a combination of all of these. So yeah, I think what a person can see it from their point of view, let's say if they are a student or like a young researcher or so, they can see it from that point of view. But from the MIT side, I think it's this way. And then if the activities that were mentioned, happen to be to fit into that, impact and the vision, then let it be that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's also about like the individuals who come and get something from MIT as a degree or a fellowship, or let's say Ibn Khaldun fellows. So we feel that we are obligated and responsible to come back to our societies and give back. And that's why we have created this Ibn Khaldun society. We can create this kind of bringing back home the message that we have learned from MIT. So I guess also is now the world is becoming smaller and connected, and the globalization is that it's not difficult for anyone to connect with people from MIT and get this sense of abundance that we have encountered while we were there. So
yeah.
I guess this is one of the unique things about MIT professors and fellows, is that you have this kind of sense of abundance, and you're really generous in sharing the ideas and innovation. I can see that there is another question here, says it's asking about the healthcare challenges that we're going through, and how can MIT support Saudi hospital through Ibn Khaldun program? But the collaboration is only with Saudi universities. So I can't. What do you think, Professor?
Yeah, I mean, I think today, as you mentioned, that there are, many challenges, but I see also, great opportunities. Whether it is in the healthcare area, of the energy, the mobility, connectivity, and all of its tools, and the high-speed internet, for example, and also the future of work. So all of these, like in just a few months, right? And then this pandemic came and then changed everything, right? Everything that I mentioned, and so I think that there are opportunities in all of these areas, in not only for perhaps for us to maybe adapt and come up with new ways of doing business or education or other things, and at the same time, maybe generating, the technologies, that can be useful to, to people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So speaking about the technology, Professor, I can see there's a question here. We are always thinking about like the role of AI or artificial intelligence in innovation. And I can add a point to that, I guess. How do you think do you think AI will replace human intelligence? And what is your reflection about this threat that some people is feeling, especially that so many of us now is working from home?
Yeah.
And we have this kind of sense of, fear. Are we going to be replaced? Are we going to be, is anyone going to let go of us? We have been replaced by a machine or a virtual call or something like that.
Yeah, so I see maybe two things, to this question. One is the artificial intelligence part that was mentioned in the question. definitely there are many tasks, right, that were done by people before, but now they are done by, computer software, algorithms, call them AI or something else, but they are very good at doing that, right? For those like specific, areas. And they do it very fast. They can analyze things, they can compute, they can maybe even, do some predictions, with maybe confidence and so on, or confidence levels. So that is one part, and I think that will continue. I believe that there are, I think, certain things that the AI, that the human can do, that the human, with the human capability and aql al-insan, the brain of the person, of the human, that it can do certain things that I believe that AI cannot do at this time. But in the end, my personal opinion, I think that we, the human, were distinguished by al-aql, by our brain, from all the other creatures. And I believe that we will continue, inshallah, to be distinguished, by that. The other thing that is important here, Dr. Sufana, is that, it's not that just like the robots or AI that would be changing, our work, is that there are like, you might call like a mismatch between the graduates, right, and then the environments. So, for example, China, maybe 25, 30 years ago, had capitalized on the labor that it had. And they built, all of the factories and companies from North America, from Europe, all went there because of the low cost, labor and so on. However, now everything is changing, because if you look in China, many of the young Chinese are very well educated, with the bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs. And this is not in China. If you look at all of Southeast Asia, from South Korea, China, Japan, all the way down to Thailand, it's about the same thing. In Europe, and even, in the countries, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Saudi Arabia. And so that means the graduate today most likely cannot, work in an assembly, factory, right? So that those companies, would have to, have automation and robotics and other, intelligent machines, to do those jobs that, people used to do before. And the other thing is that the pool of people, available people has reduced that can work in these particular tasks, not only because of the availability of these, people, but also the expectation of customers, whether they are individuals or companies, that the quality and the performance of products, is increasing and higher. And also a lot of the governments, have invested, like in innovation and entrepreneurship and so on. So there are more companies, that have come out. And so now, that pool of people is reduced. So in the end, I think this is why I mentioned about the future of work, how, we can link all of these things together. In fact, in the center, CCS, or the Center for Complex Systems at MIT that we have with CACS, one of the projects was in looking at the labor, every person, let's say, living in Saudi and working in Saudi Arabia, what is their capability and experience and so on at this point. And if you want to become, let's say, like a pilot or, whatever your next objective, then it draws like a path for you so that you can see what kind of skills that you want, that you need to gain so that you can attain that level. And then at the same time, you can look at all the companies and so on, where they are going, so that, in the industry, so that you can have a proper match. Otherwise, we end up like graduating and training people maybe in fields.
Irrelevant. you'll be, your skills won't be needed, and it's
Yeah,
irrelevant
exactly.
to the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess this is an important thing that we're also trying to implement in our little ones from now, is that to keep an open eye and to think about where is the need. I guess I have two questions that could be combined in one here. So it says, what is the ecosystem that Saudi needs to harness to support innovation? And I can see from other questions we could summarize and I can ask your question is, how do you define a good innovative idea that is worth investing in? So I guess it's on a hand, it's the ecosystem and the surrounding, and then also about being selective on where to invest in.
Yeah. So maybe so we mentioned earlier that one of the things that distinguishes between poor countries and prosperous countries, or countries that are succeeding and the one that are stagnating or failing, one was like the innovation and the talent and the ideas and all that, right? So that is like one, and so there's some work that was done by our economists, Professor Asimoglu at MIT, with political scientist Robinson, and they actually looked at these questions, failing, nations and all of that. So they came up with it's like two conditions, right? So one is to have, in their words, the inclusive political and economic institutions. So meaning that the politics has to be right, as Professor Asimoglu would say, to have the politics correct, and then the economy would follow that. And then that ecosystem, would have, all of the mechanisms in it in terms of incentives and opportunities, and then of course the institutions that will support that. And as I mentioned before, not just for some selected people, but let's say for everybody. And then the second condition is to have like an effective state, that can make like the rules and make people and entities, follow rules and so on. So if the from their work, and they have studied many countries and all that. That if this structure is not correct, then it will not work in the end. And so the key word is that from their work is having these inclusive institutions that in the end will in fact transform the whole environment to be a clear environment, efficient, very organized, with regulations. So anyone who lives, let's say in Saudi Arabia or in any nation, anyone who lives there or maybe comes to operate in there, this playing field, is nice and clear and clean, and wadah, right? So these incentives and opportunities that will be provided with all of the mechanisms that go with them are the ones, for the innovators to blossom, and also for the economy to grow.
So the second part of the question is that, from your point of view, what defines a good idea that is worth investing in, Professor Kamal? Let's say for an organization, there's so many ideas coming. How can we be selective?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, so the idea, of course, is the starting point, right? The idea is the starting point. But for that idea to succeed, as I mentioned, has to have this whole thing, with it, the whole team around that idea, the business people, the technical people, and other people that go with that, and then the whole environment. So so this is where the judgment comes, in terms of here's an idea, how to see the future, where the value of that idea. So this is what Jack Welch says, to look around the corner. He says, being able to see around the corner. And I say, if you are not able to see around the corner, use the tools, use whatever you need to be able to at least have a glimpse, of what may be happening around that corner. Dr. Sufana, if you don't mind, I give you two simple examples, right? This is from the 1800s. So Cornelius Vanderbilt, he was, he started like from a very humble beginning, and bought like one boat, borrowed $100 to buy a small boat. And then after that, he built like a whole empire, shipping empire. When he was 70 years old, and the war, the Civil War about to start in the US, guess what he does? He sells everything he had and invests it in railroads. He could see that, this war will end, and then the railroad will be the next big, business, after the war. And that's what happened. The next one is Andrew Carnegie. So Andrew Carnegie also started working when he was 12 years old. Did not go to school because he had to support, his family. And in one of his visions was to build a bridge. In fact, it was between him and his mentor, Tom Scott. But anyway, so to build this huge bridge of steel, that crosses the Mississippi River, and to bring together, as you know, the Mississippi River goes from north to south. It kind of cuts, the U.S. in half. And with this bridge, you can, connect the two. The only thing is that the span was like about, more than 1.5 miles. So, about 2.5 kilometers. And then a lot of the bridges that were built with wood and so on, failed. So what he does, he can see not only the bridge, and he wants to make it in steel, a material that hasn't been tested before in these big structures, like a big gamble, right? So it took him 4 years and they were telling him it's impossible. The currents are too high, the forces, the strength of the material, is not, high enough. And he says, nothing is impossible. And in the end, so he had the belief that he can do this. And then, in fact, he went around to look at the steel mills to learn, how they are making, the steel. And he went to England and connected with one of the, chemists and inventors, but all of those were doing things at a small scale. He needs something like at a large scale. So in the end, he did that. So not only he was gambling, in this new material that hadn't been used in this way before, and at the same time, he was building this huge plant, steel plant outside Pittsburgh, and then I think a war was going on or about to happen. And then anybody in their mind is, what are you doing this? Are you crazy? And he invested everything. He invested everything into this, the steel and the bridge at the start with.
Was able to foresee and
yes,
future.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I guess it's very important that you foresee that the importance of the product in the future, not in the current time, because it's going to take a lot of time to iterate, to produce, to design the thing, and it's going to happen in the future. So it must be relevant to the future. Right. That's great, Professor. We are right at time. Okay. I had a comment about the picture behind you. Mr. Bilal says that it's lovely, and he thinks it's from Tunisia or
very close. Yeah,
Algeria.
That was very close. That was from actually from Morocco. These are all houses, from Morocco, and then we made them as a portrait, that you can see. So that's yeah.
Right, so we are right at time, Professor Kamal. That was a great discussion with you. You're always very delightful to have, very inspiring, and thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and your unique kind of leadership with us. So thanks a lot for being with us. Thank you for the continuous support for Ibn Khaldun Fellows and for the program. We're looking forward to speaking with you again, inshallah.
thank you so much for having me, and I hope this was useful to our participants. And I look forward to continuing, our collaboration, with all of you.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
شكرا بارك الله فيكم وعيد مبارك للجميع.
مبارك لك يا دكتور.
السلام
مع
عليكم.
السلامة. عليكم السلام. All right.